I can't believe I'm finally here, this feels like a dream, whispered 22-year-old Emily Rodriguez as she stood outside the Paycom Center at 4:30 a.m., clutching her handmade poster and wearing a Thunder jersey she had saved up for 3 months to buy. Emily had just completed a 3,000-mile journey from her small hometown in rural Montana to Oklahoma City, traveling by bus for 4 days with her life savings of $247 in her pocket, all for the chance to meet Shai Gilgeous-Alexander before what might be his final game in a Thunder uniform. What Emily didn't know was that her story of sacrifice and determination would soon intersect with Shai's own journey in ways that would transform both their lives and create one of the most inspiring connections between a professional athlete and a fan in sports history. The problem wasn't just that Emily was thousands of miles from home with barely enough money to get back. It was that her journey to meet Shai would reveal a depth of personal struggle and resilience that would challenge everything Shai thought he knew about the impact professional athletes could have on the lives of people they had never met. But let me take you back to where this extraordinary journey began, because the story of how a young woman's desperate trip to meet her hero became a life-changing experience for both of them starts in a place where hope was harder to find than Thunder games on television. The date was March 3, 2024, and Emily Rodriguez sat in her studio apartment in Billings, Montana, staring at her laptop screen where a local news report was discussing trade rumors surrounding Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. At 22 years old, Emily worked 2 part-time jobs, one at a local diner and another at a grocery store, while caring for her younger brother Marcus, who had been diagnosed with leukemia 6 months earlier. Emily's life had been built around routine, responsibility, and the small moments of joy she could find in watching Thunder games on her phone when she could afford the data. Basketball had become her escape from the overwhelming stress of medical bills, endless hospital visits, and the constant fear that she might lose the only family she had left. Shai's not just a basketball player, Emily would tell Marcus during his chemotherapy sessions, holding up her phone so they could watch highlights together. He's proof that good things can happen to good people. Look how he never gives up, how he always stays positive even when things get hard. For Emily, Shai represented something more than athletic excellence. He embodied the kind of hope and perseverance that she was desperately trying to maintain in her own life. His consistency on the court had become a metaphor for the stability she was fighting to create for herself and Marcus despite circumstances that seemed determined to overwhelm them. When the trade rumors began circulating, suggesting that Shai might be moved to another team before the season ended, Emily felt something close to panic. The possibility of losing the one positive constant in her life, even if it was just watching someone she had never met play basketball, felt like it might be the final blow to her already fragile sense of hope. That night, as Marcus slept in the hospital bed next to her, Emily made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "I'm going to Oklahoma City," she whispered to herself, looking at her savings account balance on her phone. "I'm going to meet him before he leaves, and I'm going to tell him what he means to people like us." However, what Emily didn't fully understand was that her journey to meet Shai would require her to risk everything she had: her job security, her limited savings, and even her ability to be present for Marcus during a crucial phase of his treatment. Emily's plan was ambitious and naive in equal measure. She had $247 in her savings account, no credit cards, and no experience traveling beyond the borders of her small Montana town. The bus ticket to Oklahoma City cost $180, leaving her with $67 for food, transportation within the city, and somehow getting back home. "I can make this work," Emily told herself as she researched bus schedules and mapped out the cheapest route to Oklahoma City. "I just need to be smart about every dollar and hope that somehow I get the chance to meet him." Emily had never asked for anything beyond her basic needs, had never taken risks that couldn't be carefully calculated, and had never done anything that couldn't be explained by pure practicality. But the thought of Shai leaving Oklahoma City without knowing that his example had literally kept her going through the darkest period of her life felt unbearable. She requested 4 days off from both her jobs, telling her managers that she had a family emergency that required travel. She arranged for Marcus to stay with their neighbor, Mrs. Chin, who had been helping with his care when Emily's work schedule conflicted with his treatment appointments. "Where are you really going?" Marcus asked the night before Emily planned to leave, his voice weak but his eyes sharp with the intuition that had always made him seem older than his 16 years. Emily sat on the edge of his bed, trying to find words that wouldn't sound as impulsive and desperate as her plan actually was. "I'm going to meet someone who's been important to us," she said finally. "Someone who's shown us what it looks like to never give up." Marcus smiled faintly. "You're going to meet Shai." Emily nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I need him to know that what he does matters." That there are people out here who need to see someone succeed with character and grace, especially when everything else feels impossible. But what Emily couldn't anticipate was that her journey would test every bit of determination and resourcefulness she had developed during the most difficult year of her life. The bus ride from Billings to Oklahoma City took 4 days, with transfers in Denver and Kansas City that required Emily to sleep in bus stations and survive on vending machine food and the occasional free meal from sympathetic fellow travelers. By the time she arrived in Oklahoma City, Emily had $23 left, was exhausted from sleeping upright for 3 nights, and was beginning to question whether her impulsive decision had been a terrible mistake. But as the bus pulled into the Oklahoma City terminal and Emily saw the skyline of a city that had seemed impossibly far away just 4 days earlier, she felt a surge of accomplishment that reminded her why she had made this journey. "I actually did it," she said to herself as she gathered her small backpack and the poster she had protected carefully throughout the trip. "I'm here." Emily's plan for meeting Shai was optimistic but vague. She knew the Thunder's game schedule, had researched the locations where players sometimes appeared for community events, and had printed out maps showing routes between the team hotel, practice facility, and arena. But she had no connections, no insider knowledge, and no backup plan if her approach didn't work. Her first stop was the Paycom Center, where she hoped to find information about player appearances, community events, or any opportunity to get closer to meeting Shai. The security guards were polite but clear that players were not accessible to fans except during official events, and no such events were scheduled in the immediate future. "Is there anything else I can try?" Emily asked one of the guards, her voice betraying the desperation that she was trying to hide. The guard, a middle-aged man whose name tag read Jerry, looked at Emily with the kind of recognition that suggested he had seen many hopeful fans over the years. "You traveled a long way to be here, didn't you?" Jerry asked gently. Emily nodded, not trusting herself to speak without crying. "The players sometimes grab coffee at a place called Elemental about 6 blocks from here," Jerry said quietly. "I can't promise anything, but it's worth a try." However, what happened when Emily arrived at Elemental Coffee would begin a series of events that would test her courage in ways she had never imagined. Emily spent the next 2 days walking between Elemental Coffee, the practice facility, and the arena, hoping for any glimpse of Shai or opportunity to approach him. She slept on benches in parks, ate 1 meal a day from dollar menus, and carefully rationed her remaining money while fighting off the growing realization that her plan had been unrealistic. On her 3rd day in Oklahoma City, with her money nearly gone and no successful contact with Shai, Emily was sitting outside Elemental Coffee, trying to decide whether to use her last $8 for a bus ticket to the airport or for 1 more day of food, when she heard a voice behind her. "Excuse me, are you okay?" Emily turned around to see a tall, athletic young man wearing a Thunder warm-up suit and a concerned expression. It took her brain a moment to process what her eyes were seeing. It was Shai. Yes. Emily stammered, her mind going completely blank despite the fact that she had rehearsed this moment hundreds of times during her journey. Shai sat down on the bench beside her, his presence calm and genuinely interested rather than hurried or guarded. "You look like you've been having a rough couple of days," he said gently. "Are you from Oklahoma City?" Emily shook her head, finally finding her voice. "Montana. I came here to meet you." Shai's expression shifted to surprise, then concern. "You came from Montana just to meet me?" Emily nodded, tears starting to flow as the exhaustion and emotion of the past week finally overwhelmed her carefully maintained composure. "I saved up all my money and took a bus for 4 days because I needed to tell you something," she said through her tears. "And now I'm here and I don't even know what to say." But what Emily managed to say next would impact Shai in ways that changed his understanding of the responsibility and privilege that came with being a professional athlete. Through her tears, Emily told Shai about Marcus's leukemia, about working 2 jobs to pay for treatment, about the nights when fear and exhaustion made her feel like giving up. She described watching Thunder games on her phone during Marcus's chemotherapy sessions, and how Shai's consistency and character had become a source of hope during the darkest period of their lives. "You probably think this is crazy," Emily said, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her Thunder jersey. "But watching you play, seeing how you handle pressure and never give up, it's been like having a friend who reminds me that good things can happen if you just keep working and stay positive." Shai listened in complete silence, his expression growing more serious as Emily's story unfolded. "You're not crazy," he said finally. "But I need to ask you something. How are you getting home?" Emily's silence answered his question. Shai stood up slowly, his mind clearly processing the implications of Emily's situation. "Come with me," he said. "We need to figure this out." However, what happened over the next several hours would demonstrate that Emily's journey had created an opportunity for connection and impact that neither she nor Shai could have anticipated. Shai took Emily to a nearby restaurant, where he insisted she order a proper meal while they talked more about her situation and her brother's condition. As Emily ate her first full meal in 3 days, Shai made phone calls to his team's community relations department and to airline representatives, working to arrange Emily's transportation home. "This is important," Shai said to someone on the phone while Emily listened in amazement. "She made an incredible journey to be here, and we need to make sure she gets home safely." But Shai's response to Emily's story went far beyond just solving her immediate transportation problem. "Emily, I want you to know that what you've told me today is going to change how I think about basketball and what it means to be a professional athlete," Shai said as they waited for her flight arrangements to be confirmed. "I always hoped that what I did mattered to people, but I never understood the depth of impact that athletes can have on people's lives." Shai arranged for Emily to have courtside seats for that night's game, with a Thunder staff member assigned to make sure she had everything she needed. He also insisted on covering her flight home and arranging for additional support for Marcus's medical expenses through the Thunder's charitable foundation. "You don't have to do any of this," Emily protested, overwhelmed by Shai's generosity. "Yes, I do," Shai replied. "You traveled 3,000 miles to tell me that what I do matters. The least I can do is make sure that your courage and determination are honored." But what happened during that night's game would create a moment that would be remembered by everyone in attendance as one of the most moving displays of the connection between athletes and fans. Before the game began, Shai approached Emily at courtside and handed her a signed jersey with a personal message written inside. "This is for Marcus," he said. "Tell him that his sister is one of the strongest people I've ever met, and that her love for him inspired me to play harder tonight than I have all season." During the game, Shai played with an intensity and focus that was remarkable even by his standards. He scored 42 points, had 8 assists, and led the Thunder to a crucial victory that would eventually help secure their playoff position. After the game, Shai found Emily again and handed her something that would become treasured in their family forever: a handwritten letter addressed to Marcus. "Marcus," the letter read, "your sister Emily is a hero. She traveled across the country just to tell me that basketball can give people hope, but what she really taught me is that love and determination are more powerful than anything that happens on a basketball court. Keep fighting, keep believing, and know that you have people in your corner who will never give up on you." However, the most profound impact of Emily's journey would be revealed in the months that followed, as her story influenced Shai's approach to his career and his understanding of the platform he had been given. Emily returned to Montana with her transportation paid for, her brother's medical expenses supported, and a story that would give her and Marcus strength for years to come. But Shai's life had been changed just as significantly by their encounter. "Meeting Emily reminded me that being a professional athlete isn't just about basketball," Shai reflected during interviews in the weeks following their meeting. "It's about understanding that your actions and character can provide hope and inspiration to people who are facing challenges that are much more difficult than anything that happens in sports." Shai began incorporating Emily's story into his community outreach work, using her example of courage and determination to inspire other young people who were facing difficult circumstances. He also established a foundation program specifically designed to support families dealing with childhood cancer, inspired by Emily's sacrifice for Marcus and her belief that people needed examples of perseverance and hope. "Emily taught me that the most important victories happen off the court," Shai explained during the foundation's launch event. "When someone travels 3,000 miles just to say thank you, it makes you realize that everything you do should be worthy of that kind of respect and appreciation." But the most meaningful outcome of Emily's journey would be the ongoing relationship that developed between her family and Shai's foundation. Marcus's treatment was successful, aided by the medical support that Shai's foundation provided. Emily was able to reduce her working hours and focus more on her education, eventually enrolling in nursing school with a scholarship provided through Shai's charitable programs. "Shai didn't just help us financially," Emily reflected during a foundation event 2 years later. "He showed us that taking risks for the people and things you believe in can create possibilities that you never imagined." Emily became a volunteer spokesperson for Shai's foundation, sharing her story at events and helping to connect other families with the resources they needed during medical crises. "What started as a desperate journey to meet my hero became the beginning of a relationship that has transformed our entire family's life," Emily said during one of these presentations. 3 years after her 3,000-mile journey, Emily was invited to speak at the NBA's Community Impact Awards ceremony, where Shai was being honored for his charitable work. During her speech, Emily reflected on how her impulsive decision to travel to Oklahoma City had created ripple effects that continue to impact both their lives. Sometimes the most important things we do are the things that seem impossible when we start them, Emily explained to the assembled audience of athletes, executives, and community leaders. I saved up $247 to meet someone who had given me hope, and that journey created hope for countless other families who needed to know that people cared about their struggles. Emily concluded her speech by acknowledging the athlete whose character had inspired her journey and whose response had transformed it into something life-changing. Shai didn't just meet a fan that day. He recognized that someone had made a sacrifice to connect with him, and he honored that sacrifice by making sure it led to something meaningful for everyone involved. Years later, when young people asked Emily for advice about pursuing their dreams despite difficult circumstances, she would always tell them about the bus ride to Oklahoma City and the athlete who understood that true greatness meant using your platform to lift up others. The most important lesson I learned is that when you're willing to risk everything for something you believe in, you create opportunities for connections and impact that can change multiple lives, Emily would explain. But it only works when the people you reach out to understand that their success comes with the responsibility to help others succeed too. And in her nursing school dormitory, Emily kept the signed jersey and handwritten letter from Shai, along with a photo from the night she met him and a note she had written to herself. Sometimes the most impossible journeys lead to the most important destinations. The fan who traveled 3,000 miles to meet Shai had discovered that her journey was about much more than meeting her hero. It was about proving to herself and others that courage, determination, and genuine appreciation could create connections that transform lives and inspire ongoing service to others. Marcus, now healthy and in college, often reflected on how his sister's journey had changed their family's trajectory and taught them both about the power of taking action based on gratitude and hope. Emily didn't just go to meet Shai, Marcus would tell people who heard their story. She went to prove that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when they believed strongly enough in something worth fighting for. The story of Emily's 3,000-mile journey had become more than just a heartwarming tale of fan dedication. It had become an example of how authentic connection between athletes and the communities they serve could create ongoing positive impact that extended far beyond sports. Years later, when both Emily and Shai reflected on their meeting, they agreed that it had taught them both something important about the responsibility that comes with any platform or influence, whether it's athletic excellence or personal courage. Emily taught me that being worthy of someone's respect and admiration means making sure your response to that respect creates value for others, Shai said during a joint interview. When someone makes a sacrifice to connect with you, you have an obligation to make sure that sacrifice leads to something meaningful. Emily nodded. And Shai taught me that the people we look up to are just human beings who are trying to use their gifts responsibly. The best relationships between athletes and fans are the ones where both people are inspired to be better because of the connection. Their story had proven that extraordinary journeys and generous responses could create partnerships that served purposes much larger than either person could achieve alone, and that the most important meetings often happen when someone is willing to risk everything to express genuine appreciation and someone else is willing to honor that risk with meaningful action.